political reporter for the Daily Beast and friend of the program, Betsy Woodruff. Good enough to join us. Betsy, a good Friday to you. Great to have you. These swing state polls from Quinnipiac, how surprising are they, considering the month we've seen the GOP nominee have and the burgeoning email scandal continue for Hillary Clinton?
You know, what surprised me is that this latest round of Quinnipiac polls shows that Clinton's actually more competitive in North Carolina than in Ohio. We'd kind of expect that to be flipped, given that North Carolina is more of a red state, and that might suggest that we should take these Quinnipiac polls with a bit of a grain of salt. There's about 23 polls that Real Clear Politics lists of Ohio, I think head-to-head polls, and only Quinnipiac's show Trump actually leading there. That said, of course, whether or not polls correspond perfectly with reality doesn't necessarily matter for these candidates. Just the fact that Trump has this new trove of data suggesting that he's getting momentum and that things might be turning for him is invaluable just from a PR perspective. And of course, being tied in Florida, as other polling shops have also shown, is really good news for him, since obviously that's a must-win state if you want to be president.
You know, Clinton was asked about these polling numbers yesterday on the tarmac here in New York at White Plains. She said, though, something rather striking. She thought that the race would always be close. Interestingly, considering the portrait of the GOP nominee that has been portrayed by Clinton and by her running mate, Tim Kaine, whom I spoke with today. When I asked him about it today, how on earth is this thing as close as it is? He said, look, we're a country of diverse opinions, but again, these must come as something of a surprise for the Clinton campaign, no?
Yeah, without a doubt, especially given that Clinton has actually linked Trump to white supremacists, a link that I think is valid and fair. But she's making the case that upwards of, you know, depending on what poll you look at, 39 to 43% of American voters are actively supporting someone who she characterizes as a bigot and who her supporters characterize as racist and in some cases a psychopath. So it's a little tricky for Clinton because she has to be careful about not accidentally demonizing or unnecessarily demonizing a vast swath of the American population. I mean, the reality is, of course, the Clinton team is going to say, you know, we fight for every vote. We always knew it was going to be close, but I don't think they did. Remember Clinton's a year or 2 years ago when Clinton was first talking about running for president, her team presented her as the inevitable winner, as someone who'd sort of have a shock and awe approach to fundraising, the same idea as Jeb Bush, and who'd be just unbeatable. But the reality is that, you know, more and more we're seeing polling that suggests this race is going to be a bit of a knuckle biter.
And obviously the trustworthy numbers for both candidates is a problem. But for Hillary Clinton, it would appear then, considering everything you've just laid out, that the email scandal, which has become the central issue of her campaign, like it or not, is just something that's not going to go away. And those numbers specifically seem to suggest that the answers that she is providing are just not satisfying a deeply doubtful electorate. I also asked Tim Kaine today then about the characterizations of her explanation, the fact that perhaps they are just overly robotic and overly legal, if you will. And I referred to this statement that she made to Humans of New York, and to sum it up, essentially she said, look, I know that some people see me as cold and aloof, and that's something I kind of have to own. Is it something she can overcome?
I don't think so. I think if it was overcomable, she would have overcome it by now. The Clinton team has worked overtime to set her up with kind of softball, humanizing, friendly interviews. They've rolled out the Clinton campaign podcast. She's made numerous late night appearances. She's been on Ellen. She did this extremely softball interview with the Lifetime TV channel a while back. I mean, they're working overtime to try to humanize her. You know, who can forget the People magazine cover where she just sort of beamed. But the reality is that it hasn't really changed. Clinton does not come across as a warm, fuzzy, chummy person, and I think she's probably correct that there's only so much benefit to be found in fighting that when it's just the reality that it's how she's perceived, it's how she comes across.
And then there is a question: is she and is Donald Trump perceived as a fit commander-in-chief? Of course, the foreign policy debate is ratcheted this week, coming off the forum Wednesday night. The Iraq war now back at the center of this debate, certainly as Donald Trump has repeated a claim that is markedly false and has done so again, saying that he was against the Iraq war from the beginning. Statements of his own making do discount that. How do you see this, though, playing as a back and forth?
You know, it certainly makes Trump look bad when he lies. At least I like to think that lying is a downside in a presidential election. But it's what he's been saying for the entire campaign. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of voters are willing to just sort of accept it. And also, they like the basic Trump foreign policy idea, as incoherent and messy as it is. They like the idea of the U.S. not getting involved in wars that they see as unnecessary or as helpful to terrorists. And the fact that Trump has really carved out that space as his own, first is extraordinary given that he's a Republican. I mean, this is new territory in the modern era for a Republican presidential nominee. But second, it does put Clinton in kind of an uncomfortable position because she's simultaneously defending a stance that she took that she now regrets, while also trying to present herself as someone who is able to make some changes in terms of foreign policy. So it's tough because Trump can talk about it in a way that's very simplistic, and Clinton can't.
Well, and I guess it really does capture, as does my next point, the up is down nature of all of this. We also saw Hillary Clinton on that tarmac invoking Ronald Reagan, saying, what would Ronald Reagan say about a GOP nominee cozying up to Vladimir Putin? I suppose she would also wonder what he might say when Trump's running mate, as Indiana Governor Mike Pence did yesterday, would reiterate this claim then that Vladimir Putin has been a markedly stronger leader for Russia than has Barack Obama for the United States. All of which gets me to the fact that today we do expect Governor Pence to release his tax returns. Do you think this will then put added pressure on Donald Trump to do the same, if only to dispel the idea that coziness with Russia and other nations and actors in those nations might be found in those very returns?
I think it will put more pressure on him, and it absolutely gives Democrats a really potent talking point to use. I think we can expect to see them hitting Trump over not releasing his tax returns in the same way Republicans over the past few months criticized Hillary really pointedly for not doing press conferences. It's a similar issue, questions of transparency, although, of course, not releasing your tax returns is historically unprecedented in the modern era. That said, Trump has already resisted a massive amount of pressure to release these returns, which could suggest that there's something in them that he really doesn't want people to see, and that could actually do more damage to him than the damage he's going to incur by keeping them to himself. So although it's possible, I mean, anything's possible this election, I think it's not super likely that Pence releasing his returns is going to get Trump himself on the transparency bandwagon.
Betsy, I think you and I can agree that 2016 has had quite enough with precedent. I think we have established that, if nothing else. Betsy Woodruff of the Daily Beast, as always, we appreciate the insight.
Likewise, thanks.